Drama in the F1 paddock. All 20 drivers recently sat down with the FIA stewards in Qatar for their big annual driving standards review meeting. Now, you'd think getting all these hyper-competitive athletes in one room to talk rules would be interesting, and it was, but maybe not in the way the FIA hoped. According to Sky F1's Martin Brundle, some drivers were so unimpressed that they considered walking right out of the meeting. We're going to dive into what happened, who was unhappy, and what this means for the future of F1 racing. So, let's set the scene. This meeting is a yearly tradition, where drivers and the governing body hash out the rules of engagement on track. A huge topic this year was the consistency of penalties. You've probably been watching a race, seen an incident, and then been completely baffled by the steward's decision, right? Well, the drivers feel the same way. One of the key examples they brought up was Oscar Piastri's 10-second penalty from the Brazilian Grand Prix. You might remember Carlos Sainz, a director of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, calling that penalty unacceptable. And that's just one of many incidents that have left drivers, and us fans, scratching our heads. The heart of the problem seems to be the Racing Guidelines document. This is supposed to give drivers a clear idea of how the stewards will judge things like overtaking and defending. But there's a growing fear that these guidelines are a bit too rigid, and in some cases, drivers are even using them to game the system, knowing how to force another driver into a position where they'll get a penalty. It's turning wheel-to-wheel racing into a legal debate at 200 miles per hour. Following the intense meeting, the FIA released a statement. They tried to calm the waters, referring to the guidelines as a living document. They stressed that they are guidelines, not regulations. Essentially, they're saying there's meant to be room for interpretation. The FIA even presented data from the last 3 seasons, claiming that these guidelines have actually led to more consistent decisions. But, as we're about to find out, not everyone in that room was buying it. This is where Martin Brundle drops the bombshell. He was on the ground in Qatar, and he said he spoke to 1 or 2 people who thought about walking out of that meeting. He didn't name names, but he said they felt it was a waste of time. Brundle, a former driver himself, knows the dynamic. He pointed out that if you ask 20 drivers for their opinion, you're going to get 20 different answers. It's always been that way. He also defended the stewards to an extent, acknowledging they have a tough, high-pressure job. They have to make subjective calls in a matter of minutes, all while the world is watching. It's a thankless task, but the drivers clearly feel the system is broken. So, who were these drivers on the verge of walking out? While we don't know for sure, we do know who it wasn't. 2 of the paddock's brightest young stars, Oscar Piastri and George Russell, both came out and described the meeting as very productive. Piastri, who was at the center of that controversial Brazil penalty, said it was good to give direct feedback to the stewards and tidy up a few things. He made a great point, saying that whenever you try to write rules for something as fluid as racing, there will always be gaps. It's impossible to cover every single scenario. He felt the meeting was a good step toward closing some of those gaps. George Russell, another director of the GPDA, echoed Piastri's thoughts completely. He said, "Yeah, definitely productive." He revealed that when the stewards showed clips of various incidents, all the drivers were actually in agreement about what the outcome should have been. This is a crucial point. It shows that the drivers themselves have a shared understanding of what is and isn't fair racing. The problem isn't the drivers' understanding. It's how that understanding is being translated into official penalties. Russell then went on to make what I think is the most important point of this entire debate. He said that the consensus in the room was that these guidelines must remain just that, guidelines. Every track is different, every corner is different, and every single overtaking attempt is a unique situation. He argued that you have to use the racing knowledge that drivers and experienced stewards have accumulated over decades. You have to judge incidents based on the common sense of racing, not just by ticking boxes in a rulebook. His closing line was brilliant. Otherwise, you may as well have a lawyer dishing out the penalties. And he's absolutely right. We don't want Formula One to become a sport decided in the courtroom. We want it decided on the racetrack. This brings us to the core of the conflict. The FIA wants consistency, and to achieve that, they've created a more structured set of guidelines. But in doing so, they've removed some of the nuance and subjective judgment that's essential to motorsport. The drivers are pushing back. They're asking for the stewards to be empowered to use their experience and common sense, to look at an incident and understand the context, rather than just applying a rigid rule. It's a fundamental disagreement on the philosophy of officiating. The drivers who felt the meeting was a waste of time likely believe the FIA is untruly listening to this core request. They see the FIA doubling down on its guidelines and data, while they're screaming for a return to common-sense stewarding. So, what happens now? The FIA says the guidelines are a living document, which implies they're open to change. The drivers, especially leaders like Russell and Sainz, are clearly going to keep pushing for more flexibility and a greater reliance on racing instinct in the decision-making process. Will we see a change? I'm cautiously optimistic. The fact that the drivers are so united in their core message is powerful. When you have figures like Piastri and Russell, who are seen as the future of the sport, speaking so clearly and intelligently on the issue, the FIA has to listen. This isn't just about penalties. It's about the very soul of Formula One. Do we want a sport that's overregulated, where drivers are afraid to make a move for fear of a penalty that might be decided by a technicality? Or do we want a sport that encourages hard, fair racing, adjudicated by experienced people who understand the art of the overtake? I think I know which version we all want to watch. The outcome of this debate will shape the on-track action for years to come. Let's hope the productive conversations lead to real, tangible changes that benefit the drivers, the teams, and most importantly, us, the fans. It will be fascinating to see how stewarding decisions evolve next season. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into everything happening in the world of Formula One. We'll see you in the next one.